Paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Good evening. In just a moment, headliners first. Let's bring you up to date with the latest headlines. And Rishi Sunak has faced the House of Commons questions today for his first Prime Minister's session, vowing to rebuild public finances in a way that is fair and compassionate. Mr Sunak addressed what he called the mistakes of his predecessor, Liz Truss, and he promised to protect the most vulnerable. But the debate was dominated by the reappointment of the Home Secretary. Suella Braverman reportedly breached the ministerial code last week, then resigned. Well, the Prime Minister defended his decision to reappoint her, whilst the Labour leader questioned it.
The Secretary made an error of judgment, but she recognised that. She raised the matter and she accepted her mistake. And that's why I was delighted to welcome back into a united cabinet that brings experience and stability to the heart of government.
Yesterday, the Prime Minister stood on the steps of Downing Street and promised integrity, professionalism and accountability. But then, with his first act, he appointed a Home Secretary who was sacked by his predecessor.
Meanwhile, the Chancellor has delayed the announcement of the government's economic plan by 2 weeks, moving it to the 17th of November. Jeremy Hunt says the medium-term plan, which was due to be announced next Monday, will now be upgraded to an autumn statement, taking into account the latest forecast from the Office of Budget Responsibility as well. Mr Hunt says he's already demonstrated he's willing to make choices that are politically embarrassing if they're in the national interest.
Now we have a new Prime Minister and the prospect of much longer-term stability for the economy in the country. And in that context, a short 2.5-week delay is the best way we will make sure that it is the right decisions we take.
Now, in other news, the Mayor and Deputy Mayor of Greater Manchester have said they welcome the decision to send 2 men from a Rochdale grooming gang back to Pakistan, but said it's taken too long. The gang members, Adil Khan and Kari Abdul Rauf, were convicted of a series of sex offences against young girls in 2012. They fought a 10-year legal battle to stay in the UK on the grounds of their human rights, but have now lost a deportation appeal. Immigration judges said Khan showed a breathtaking lack of remorse. Now, the Prime Minister says he's been discussing how the UK and Ireland can work together as close neighbours and friends to find solutions on the Northern Ireland Protocol. Downing Street says Rishi Sunak has told Michael Martin on a call this evening he hopes for a negotiated outcome regarding the protocol. It said the 2 leaders have agreed on the urgent need for a functioning Stormont executive in Northern Ireland and will continue talks in the coming weeks. And Rishi Sunak has celebrated Diwali this evening. The Hindu Prime Minister said it was brilliant to drop in at a reception at number 10. In a tweet, he said he'd do everything he could to build a Britain that looks to the future with hope. And he wished everyone a happy Diwali. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, you're with GB News. Time now for headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners, your first look inside Thursday's newspapers. I'm Andrew Doyle and joining me tonight are the Headliners A-team. We've got Leo Kearse and the big dog himself, Nick Dixon. Leo, you need a nickname, don't you?
Yeah. I'm bigger than Nick.
You are bigger than Nick,
It's
yes.
the Scottish bully.
Scottish bully, we'll go with that.
We've got a story about sensitive people. You should be in that.
Yeah, we will be talking about that in a
me.
bit. But before we get to that, let's stop squabbling and take a look at tomorrow's front pages. We're going to start with Thursday's Mail. And they're going to lead with Rishi's migrant crisis headache. We're going to be covering that in a moment. Thursday's Telegraph has Sunak reconsiders tax rises as budget delay saves £15 billion. The Prime Minister apparently is rethinking the sweeping spending cuts and refuses to guarantee pensions triple lock. We're going to be covering that, of course. Thursday's Guardian, fracking banned and pensions in spotlight as Liz Truss legacy rejected. Sunak has effectively torn up all of Liz Truss's reforms. Thursday's Financial Times, delay to fiscal statement wins breathing space for Hunt. That's the debt reduction plan has been put back by 3 weeks. Going to the front of the Mirror now, bravery of a nation. Zelensky, our pride. This is the Mirror Awards, apparently. Thursday's Times has Sunak, better education can be our silver bullet. Could be true. Thursday's Express, do you really want to scrap pensions triple lock again? We're going to be leading with that story in just one moment. And the front of the Metro, don't be gay at World Cup. This is the story that James Cleverly has apparently suggested that gay people ought to modify their behaviour when they are visiting Qatar for the World Cup, although I should say that that headline is not a direct quotation. Bit misleading. Thursday's Daily Star finally has some nonsense about zombie pigeons, and those are your front pages. And we're going to kick off now with the Express front page, which has got all the details on Rishi's first grilling as PM at PMQs. Nick?
Yes, and they're going with the pensions triple lock angle. So pensions could be target of Rishi Sunak's cuts as Number 10 refuses to commit to keeping the triple lock. If you somehow have missed the triple lock, I know it's very exciting. It's about the state pensions going up in line with either the inflation earnings or 2.5%, whichever is the largest figure. Truss said she was committed to it, even though inflation was up to 10% and people were freaking out, whereas the hint is that Rishi's coming in with fiscal conservatism. Actually, this might be one area where he could cut, and he's not talking about whether he will or not.
So should we be worried? I mean, this article is talking about how it's a raid on old age pensions. I mean, that sounds pretty brutal.
Well, if it happens, I mean, this is the thing with Rishi, isn't it? He's come in, he's making things stable. What's it? Something in the ship. He's doing something with the ship where you make it more stable. I've forgotten the phrase.
Stabilising the ship?
It's not. That's not it. But it's something like that. Righting the ship. I think it's righting the ship.
Okay.
Anyway, he's doing something with a ship, and and it's very popular because he's coming in. People didn't like Truss, but how long will this last? This is goodwill around what is basically austerity.
Yeah.
But for now, in the short term, it's good because he's all Mr. Stable. But in the longer term, people are already thinking, what about my pension?
What do you think, Leo?
Well, I think older people are richer. I've noticed as I've got older, I've got richer. So I think, on a serious note, the wealth is concentrated in older people. They've benefited the most from rising asset values. So older people are more likely to own a house. And obviously, all the money that's been printed in the last 15 years has flooded into fixed assets, mostly housing. So, we need to find some way of sharing the burden on the public purse
they don't work,
with older people.
They don't have jobs. So
Exactly.
they rely on the pensions.
They're not even contributing to the economy. And yet, somehow national insurance and income tax has got to be taxed to pay for all this. No, we should find some way of... I think maybe not...
OK, President Xi.
I mean, it doesn't look good, does it, from a PR perspective, to be going after the elderly? Does it, Nick? I mean, surely...
Well, Leo likes it.
Leo does, but Leo's an atypical voter.
But it's not going to be a good look for Conservative voters because they tend to be sort of older people. But then they tend to be richer people who aren't worried about the state pension.
But you think there's a lot of goodwill towards Rishi Sunak, don't you? But I mean, even though a lot of people...
For now.
Well, but a lot of people do feel that it was a bit unjust that
well, that's a different thing. I was one of those people. I mean, the way he was elected was completely wrong because they didn't go to the members. I've already said this. They betrayed the people when they deposed Boris, because that's who people voted for. They betrayed the members when they brought in Rishi, despite the members explicitly rejecting him. However, we don't want to talk about that every night, so I've moved on to how he's doing now, and he's made some good appointments. He's had a good start. But there's already hints that his fiscal conservatism, people will get tired of it. Because people like free money. They liked it when he gave out money during the lockdown. Yeah. They don't like, eye-watering cuts, and we've got to be sensible about spending. And Starmer's going to start attacking him on spending and all the time.
OK,
people have got used to bailouts and free money for the last 15 years, and it's become the norm for government. So, yeah, now that he's got to move away from that, I think it's going to be squeaky time.
OK, we shall see Thursday's Guardian now, and Rishi ripping up Truss's legacy, Leo. I mean, he's left nothing.
Yeah, so Sunak has dismantled the remainder of Truss's legacy on his first full day in office. He's abandoned fracking, refuses to guarantee the pensions triple lock we were just talking about, or the defence spending rise. So, yeah, I mean, the fracking thing is the thing that really jumps out at me, because that really made sense. Fracking, you know, in the middle of an energy crisis, making sure that, you know, your nation at least is producing some gas. So if, you know, if the markets break down, you're not dependent on, you know, begging France for energy. But this is a tendency that Rishi has had throughout his political career. It's populist NIMBYism. He won't make decisions that are in the national interest if they go against, you know, certain interest groups or groups of Tory voters. So
explain this to me. Why would it be the case that the fracking issue in particular he would seek to revoke? Because that doesn't make sense to me.
Well, partly it's because he's part of the WEF net zero cabal, who, you know, want us to all be eating bugs and, you know, having solar panels and all the rest of it.
Is he just going in and ripping up... I mean, it's almost like when Trump went in after Obama and just deliberately tried to reverse anything that he'd ever achieved or put into place. It feels a bit like that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's sort of like a purge. But that's what politicians do when they come in. They rip up everything that the previous politician did. But yeah, I mean, he's previously, you know, HS2, solar panels, wind farms, fracking. He won't pass things. He won't allow things to move forward that would be greatly beneficial for the economy and for the infrastructure.
I know, Nick, you're not as obsessed with fracking as Leo is.
I'm not sure anyone is.
No.
I'd pity someone who accidentally mentioned it to Leo at a party, like 2 hours later. And another thing.
But you can see the wisdom of what Liz Truss was trying to do there. These reserves of shale gas that are accessible in an energy crisis. It makes sense, doesn't it?
Critique of the more sort of deep state people make is that fracking doesn't even produce enough energy. But I'm instinctively in favour of it because the kind of people I like agree with it. And it saves me doing the actual boring research. So I'm pro-fracking. But I think it was bad that therefore I think it's bad that he's reinstated the fracking ban. What I do think is more smart is that he seems to be vaguely going back to the 2019 agenda. What people really voted for was pro-NHS, sensible on immigration, investment, which is where he might be a bit weak, levelling up, a sort of red wall agenda. What Truss's mistake was, she came in at an unstable time, then tried to do a very different agenda from what they've been elected on. That's what got her in trouble.
Well, since we've got you here, Leo, why do people oppose fracking?
Because, well, the people are worried about environmental contamination and, you know, mess and industrial pollution in their backyards. But really, you know, it's been proven that there's hardly any of that. And if there is some, you know, it's probably not going to do you that much harm. So just flare off. If there's any gas coming out your water tap, just flare it off like they do in oil fields.
Really bad advice.
Jacob Rees-Mogg said he'd be happy to have fracking in his own garden, but sadly now he's on the back bench, so that's not gone very well for him.
No, not at all. Next is the Daily Mail front page, and they're leading with a migrant story already causing a problem for Rishi Sunak. Leo?
Yeah, so there's a new report that says 38,000 migrants have crossed the Channel this year, 12,000 from Albania alone. That's apparently that's up to 2% of the entire adult Albanian male population.
Really?
So these are huge numbers. I mean, 2 years ago, only 50 people arrived from Albania. And it's costing the country £7 million a day to house them in hotels. The system's overwhelmed. It's criminal gangs that are running this, so it's funding, mafia gangs, and it's helping them commit other sorts of crime. So this is something that really needs to be tackled. And the fact that, so many are coming from Albania really sort of exposes the lie that, these aren't asylum seekers. In the main, a majority of them are economic migrants, and they've found a loophole. They found an easy way to get into the UK. You come across on something that floats, you get here, and then the whole system is geared towards letting you stay.
I mean, with these kind of figures, it's obvious that the government has to do something about it, just in terms of the electorate isn't going to stand for it. But, Nick, isn't it impossible? Because whenever people try to have a sensible discussion about migration, the accusation of racism gets thrown around, and then the discussion goes away.
Incredibly difficult. Although now you've got Rishi and you've got Suella Braverman, maybe that makes it a bit harder to call them racist, which is one advantage. But apparently 1 to 2% of the Albanian population coming over on small boats. They can't be that small. How small is Albania? I was just trying to do the maths. How do you get that many people on small boats? But yeah, if you talk to your average sort of middle-class person in North London, they're not that bothered about this. But I think people around the country are, because they see these hotels all these people in, and they're like, what's this? Into their community. There's an issue of safety, the numbers, but the problem is, what do you do about it? Someone had a suggestion that was a friend of ours. Actually, I'll say who it is later. But had a suggestion: you just stick them on a Sea Lion helicopter, dump them back in France, and let France deal with it, just to show that you're serious about getting rid of.
So much of this. I mean, the thing is, we do have a tradition in this country of helping people who are fleeing war. You know, that's actually, I think, something we ought to be really proud of. But if it is a matter of predominantly economic migrants in this case, then that's. You know, and again, I understand why people would want to migrate for better life. That makes sense.
Well, and also we do need economic migration. And we've got high levels of migration. There's 1.2 million visas issued last year, which is a record high. So we're a high immigration country, and we're mostly pretty relaxed about it. But the thing is, these people they're jumping the queue and they're gaming the system. This system's there to help people who are genuinely in need, who are fleeing war and pestilence and all the rest.
And that's not. There's no war in Albania.
There's no war in Albania. There's no war in France either. So
no, that's true. Yeah, that's true. OK, well, we're going to move on now to Thursday's Telegraph. Suella Braverman looks like she's being targeted already by the opposition, Nick.
Yeah, well, Lord Gavin Barwell has said that he would not have hired or rehired Suella Braverman. And some people have criticised this, that people are going absolutely mad on Twitter about it. People like Simon Sharma and the Caroline Lucas type, the liberal media types and politicians and so on, it seems to have really wound them up.
Is this because of this potential security breach?
Yeah, so, well, that's one reason. That's the ostensible reason, but they just don't like Suella Braverman, basically. So Starmer talked about it in PMQs. He said that, look, you've got this person who deliberately pinged around these emails. I don't know if it was deliberate or not. I don't think anyone really cares about the email issue. I mean, as Dominic Cummings says, it happens all the time. Yeah. What was a better accusation was that he's pointing out that Starmer, or he's alleging that Sunak has made a sort of deal with Suella Braverman. You can have your job back if you back me, because she's suddenly backed Rishi, which some people were surprised by. And that's got a bit more weight to it. But I think it's a shrewd appointment because of the reasons we've just said. People are concerned about immigration, mass immigration, and especially illegal immigration. And Braverman is someone who is tough on that. So what Rishi's done, he's come in, he knows he's more on the sort of what the sort of blob, I don't want to say globalist, the Remainer blob side of the party. Well, he's not a Remainer, he's a Brexiteer, weirdly, but he's seen as sort of being on the sort of one nation, what would you call, whatever that side is, the slight left of the party. So he's brought in people like Kemi, Badenoch and Suella Braverman to sort of have a balanced cabinet, and I think it's a good idea.
Leo, on that, do you think the cabinet appointments have been a positive step?
Yeah, I mean, it is an attempt to sort of hold the party together. So, you know, Suella Braverman represents the sort of ERG, the European Research Group side of the party. And, you know, the difficulty for Rishi is going to be holding the party together. But it's ridiculous, some of the criticism that's come out for Rishi's new government. People on the left are saying it's an extreme far-right party, but it's barely to the right of New Labour. It's a nonsense. So Bridget Phillipson, the Shadow Education Secretary, has said, you know, one moment Rishi Sunak is telling us he'll lead a government of integrity. The next moment he's appointing someone back into the cabinet who'd been sacked only the week before for a serious breach of security and a breach of the ministerial code. There was a couple of emails, like you said, and she wasn't sacked.
So
she resigned.
What's going on here? Why is there this sort of constant hyperbole in political discourse now? It feels like they could have Che Guevara on the front bench. They'd still say it's an extreme right-wing party. You know? They're
going to get a shock when the UK goes through its sort of Italian or Swedish convulsion and gets an actually right-wing party in power.
Yeah, which probably what happens because we don't have PR. But it's Caroline Lucas on Twitter called it terrifyingly right-wing. I mean, and Alistair Campbell said this is going to be a very right-wing government, just as I feared. And my theory on it is that they sort of know it's not. My theory is that they're terrified of it shifting even, you know, an inch to the right in the Overton window, so they just scream whenever anything gets slightly right.
Is it just that politicians are starting to behave in the way that people do on Twitter now? Like there used to be a sort of a barrier between those two modes of behaviour, and now it seems as though they're just emulating that kind of screaming, hyperbolic, just shrill nonsense. It's not. This isn't how politicians are meant to debate.
Well, Caroline Lucas is in the Green Party, so it's normal for them.
Well, let's move on now to Thursday's Mirror. With all the focus on cabinet diversity, someone seems to have forgotten to include educational backgrounds there, Nick.
Yes, one of my hobby horses. Nearly two-thirds of Rishi Sunak's new cabinet attended private school. Analysis revealed just under a quarter, 23%, attended a comprehensive. Now, I was saying how Truss was the first comprehensive PM, arguably the second if you count Theresa May, whose school changed when she was there. But basically not many people from comprehensive schools. Now, Truss hasn't done a very good job, to be fair, but I would then say that's probably because she was part of the A-list and she was part of this, artificially promoting people above their station to hit quotas. That's another argument. Anyway, or maybe she was just not that good. But the point is, in the cabinet, we still have hardly anyone from comprehensive school. And I actually agreed with Jess Phillips, who tweeted. She said, "Oh, it's good that we've got a British Asian PM. It looks like the real barrier is actually class then." So,
but of course it is.
Of course it is.
It always
was. I know, but what's hilarious is that it's her party, the ones who've abandoned the working class and probably lower middle class, and now they're sort of getting back to realising, oh, remember working class people, which is what Labour are supposed to do.
It wasn't always the way. I mean, Labour politicians who ended up in the House of Commons were often from working class backgrounds. They were miners, and
because of the grammar school system, which was destroyed by the left.
So, would you support a quota relating to private education?
Whoa. I've gone woke on. I'll go woke on comprehensive school. We have to have a quota. No, I wouldn't really, because what I want, Andrew, is merit, but I just want better education opportunities for people of all backgrounds, which is what the grammar school system used to represent. I want the 11 plus back, so normal people... You know, my dad got to go to grammar school because he was smart, even though he came from a working class family, and I didn't. We've gone backwards in social mobility. That's what I always say. So, that's what I want.
I mean, this is the thing, isn't it, that when you talk about privilege and identity issues surrounding race, gender, sexuality, they always forget about money. And, you know, the way that you get a top job, really, is largely through nepotism and private education and then Oxbridge, etc. And the truth is that if you're born poor, the odds are stacked against you. That's the truth.
Absolutely. And you're the prejudice you receive. So people judge you on, you know, the way you talk and your appearance, you know, I'd say probably more than, you know, ethnicity or anything like that. So yeah, it's ridiculous. But I mean, it does sort of show that rich people are better. And surely it's good that we've got better educated people in government. You don't want, you know, I mean, all right, you want a few just to keep the Guardian off your back.
No, well, what we found within the grammar school system is that people from poorer backgrounds often did outdo those people from public schools when they had the chance. When they had, this is well known. Well, how do you think you got people like Melvin Bragg and Dennis Potter and all these people? It was a whole generation, and that's because they had the opportunity. So it wasn't lack of brains. But yeah, you're absolutely right about nepotism. Of course, you're going to put your mates and people you know. Rishi Sunak, I know he was young. I'm not trying to have a pop, but he did admit he didn't know any working class people in that video, so he's not going to put them in his cabinet. He doesn't know who they are.
Leo, there are so many examples. I mean, I used to teach at a posh private school for girls, and they were having a charity auction.
Dream job.
They were having a charity auction one night where they were auctioning off internships at GQ magazine. So it's bad enough that the only people who could get those internships, because they're unpaid, come from posh backgrounds anyway. Now you've got parents buying them for their kids. Absolutely insane.
Yeah, and like, you don't need to tell me. I was a comedian, and comedians have the ultimate internship where, you know, really it's very difficult to do all that unpaid work if you're not from a posh background.
That's why there are so many middle-class comedians.
Absolutely. But I mean, the thing about state education, there's obviously really good state schools, and the education system is so warped that if you send your kids to a good state school, you're still spending the money. It's just the money goes on housing. You pay more for a house, you know, the school. So the postcode lottery. The estate agent gets paid for the work that the teacher's doing.
Right. OK, well, we're going to move on now to Thursday's Metro. Their front cover is leading with this story, a government minister asking people to be less gay while in Qatar. If you know anything about gay people, it's very difficult for us to be less gay.
We've asked you, and it's failed.
What do you make of this one?
Is this you doing this on?
Oh yeah, well, my name's on the top of it.
But have a crack.
Basically, James Cleverly, the Foreign Secretary, has been accused of tone-deaf advice to gay World Cup fans heading to Qatar, which is, as we all know by now, a country not known for its open-mindedness towards homosexuality. So he urged fans to be respectful of the host nation during the tournament in Qatar, where homosexuality is illegal. He said, one of the things I would say for football fans is, you know, please do be respectful of the host nation. They're trying to ensure that people can be themselves and enjoy the football. And I think with a little bit of flex and compromise at both ends, it can be a safe, secure and exciting World Cup. So if you just stop holding hands, then they'll stop beheading you. You know, okay, that's sort of common. I mean,
this is kind of reminiscent of what there were councils, or at least areas in Germany, when there was the migrant crisis going on, and they were distributing leaflets to women saying, you know, given that there's lots of Muslim immigrants now, maybe you might want to wear more modest clothing. Yeah. In other words, victim blaming. Yeah. You know, and it's a similar thing, isn't it?
Well, it's similar, but the obvious difference there, of course, is that that's happening in Germany, where you say, well, hang on, we should be able to assert our Western values, whereas this is, we're going over to Qatar. Now, I'm not saying it makes it right, but it makes it slightly different from the example you're saying. If it was something more minor, let's say manners or something, one does adapt to the country you're in, right? That's normal. Yeah. Like in French, you have a go at speaking French and they hate you or whatever. But this is obviously a little bit different. different. It is a bit bizarre to ask people to not be gay. He's got himself in a bit of a pickle here,
He
Clement.
didn't quite say
no.
gay.
I
think they've
people are being very
misquoted him.
unfair.
Kind of hinted at it.
He
though.
said something a lot more mild. I mean, the Telegraph had like "be less queer" as a headline. He didn't say it at all. No,
Yeah.
but there is the problem is you having the World Cup in Qatar. That's the big problem. That's where this all comes from, and that's why we're in all these pickles. In general, I think we should be much more bold about our own culture. I don't buy into a lot of cultural relativism. We should say we have better values.
Yeah.
But if you are going over to a country that has these laws, what's going to happen?
Well,
it's a bit irresponsible, for example, for people like Gary Lineker to have a go at cleverly and say, well, they should be doing what they want. But there's a safety issue.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, the truth is, I don't think the Qatari government will be arresting any fans for holding hands. It would be such a disaster for them to start doing
that. But they've already arrested Peter Tatchell for demonstrating, and this really exposes the lie of all the corporate virtue signalling that we see. All the football players taking the knee for Black Lives Matter, but then playing in Qatar, where the stadiums are built by slaves. They'll literally be playing on the death sites of slaves.
I mean, surely the solution would have been not to select Qatar as the host country.
Rainbow laces and pride flags and stuff in this country where the battle's to a certain extent already been won. But then going across to Qatar and playing,
it's easier to fight a battle that you've already won, isn't it? Anyway, coming up after the break, we're going to be discussing the potential presidential candidate that is getting Trump nervous, why Germany is planning to legalise cannabis, and we're also going to be talking about what's going on at Stormont. See you in 2.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christys, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for The Briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, The Briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
Welcome back to Headliners with me, Andrew Doyle, and with me tonight I've got the comedians Leo, the Scottish bully Curse, and the big dog Nick Dixon. So that's the nickname we're going with Leo. I think that works. Anyway, Thursday's Guardian, sidelined by Westminster politics, Stormont politics, looks like it's heading to a season finale. And the plot twist that everyone saw coming, another election. Yep.
Yes. Well, Andrew, I'm not going to try and explain this to you because you're Irish, so you can give us all the local flavour. I'll just give the facts for the viewers. So basically, the DUP continue their boycott because they said we're not going to get involved in this power-sharing government unless you ditch the protocol. And then Steve Baker said, well, stop doing that. You should just choke that down. And Chris Heaton-Harris has said, look, I'll call an election if you don't sort this by 28th of October if you don't form an executive. However, Donaldson, leader of the DUP, has basically done that meme where it goes, I accept your terms. He's basically said, bring it on, because his base like his tough stance and they're ready for an election. Now, Sinn Féin have said the same because they think they'll do well in the election, and only the Alliance Party, who are more centrist, have said, well, this election is going to be very costly and completely pointless.
So my question here is, what good would an election in December do? So the deadline is Friday. They're not going to restore power sharing by that point. The executive isn't going to reform in that short time frame. You have an election in December, you're going to return similar results. So what does that achieve?
Yeah, I mean, it seems pointless to have more political machinations. I mean, who do they think they are? Britain. It's it's a nonsense. But I mean, I think long term the outlook for Northern Ireland and resolving the issues around Brexit and the borders and all the rest of it look pretty good, because the EU and the UK are being nicer to each other because the threat of other countries following the UK out of Europe has receded. So the EU isn't so keen on being harsh on the UK, and Ireland also isn't particularly keen on unification.
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends on who you talk to. I mean, you've got Michelle O'Neill has been talking about another referendum for unification. There are overtures in that direction. Obviously, the unionists are not happy. There are people saying they're going to leave the country should that occur. But really, I mean, how do we break this deadlock? Because ultimately, the DUP's stance is completely clear on this, that the protocol is incompatible with the Good Friday Agreement. You can have one or the other, right? So they're not going to amend their position on this. Yeah. So then how do we break this deadlock?
You're asking me how to solve the problems in Ireland. It's stumped a few people, this one.
It has.
No, I agree that apparently, people say since Sinn Féin got in that the union becomes possible again. Many people do think that.
They see it as a stepping stone, yeah.
And as you say, the election, Naomi Long from the Alliance Party says £6 million it will cost them, be totally pointless. But as for how to solve it, I was hoping you were going to tell them.
Well, Sinn Féin are effectively seeing the fact that they are now the largest party in Northern Ireland as being a kind of mini referendum on unity, I suppose. Some people have sort of suggested that, but you can't see it in these terms.
That's the SNP argument. They say we're the largest party, so that means we should have a referendum. But no,
here also, I mean, the whole point of a power-sharing executive is you need both. I mean, the First Minister and the Deputy First Minister have the same power. One cannot do anything without the other. So this has to be resolved. And this article is weird. It's saying it's raised questions about the viability of power-sharing institutions. But if you don't have a power-sharing institution, the Good Friday Agreement is in the bin anyway. So it doesn't feel like...
Do you think you should return home, Andrew, and solve it? I think you've got a big enough following now.
I should resolve it. I've no idea how to resolve it. Anyway, we're going to move on now to the Times. Well, not much can put President Trump on edge, but apparently Ron DeSantis, Nick.
Yes, very interesting. DeSantis refuses to rule out White House run, and they've gone in the headline, keeping Donald Trump on edge. Bit of clickbait. But basically what happened, he was in a debate with Charlie Crist, who's the Democrat candidate in Florida. And he used to be a Republican, which has been used against him, as you'd imagine. And they were in a little debate on Monday, and he basically said, well, are you going to still be governor of Florida, meaning you're going to have a pop at the big job? And instead of replying, DeSantis said, you're an old donkey. Essentially, he basically said, well, is it my time? Because it wasn't a Q&A, so he just basically ran down the clock and waited. And he said that he was just an old donkey and blah, blah, because he's 66 and DeSantis is 44. But it is interesting because my understanding was that Trump has the party behind him. Even though some people like DeSantis, Trump has all the support. But if you look at some of these polls, ABC Ipsos poll are claiming 72% have said DeSantis, only 64% Trump.
Yeah.
And there's a few polls like this. So I don't know. It's interesting. Although, let's be honest, Trump has the story, he has the narrative arc, he has the comeback. And he's obviously very controversial in a way that DeSantis isn't quite. But either of them would beat any Democrat at the moment because Joe Biden can't beat either of them. And who else have the Dems got? I don't see anyone that can beat either of them.
Leo, I mean, this is quite surprising, some of these poll results for Trump. It doesn't feel like he is this massive frontrunner that he thinks he is.
Yeah.
But do you think it's partly because he won't let go of this narrative that the election was rigged? I mean, in this article, they quote this rally he gave in Texas the other day, and he said, "I ran twice, I won twice." Don't you think people are thinking this sore loser thing is just not working?
Yeah, I mean, all politicians do it for a bit, but yeah, after a couple of years, you've got to let it go.
Yeah, exactly.
Otherwise, you look a bit crazy. And DeSantis had been given an 8-point lead over Trump and a 4-point lead in a prospective election against Biden. But yeah, I think Trump is divisiveness and that sort of clinging to all these almost conspiracy theories. Some people would call them conspiracy theories. I think they're all correct, but it energizes his base, but it also
alienates far more.
reasonable people.
This is the point, isn't it, Nick? That ultimately people are sick of this kind of divisive culture war style of politics. They really are.
I love it.
I know you love it, and some people here have enjoyed. You've enjoyed it yourself, Nick. Yeah. But ultimately, when it comes to running a country, they don't want any of this. They want normality just for a change.
I'll answer that. I just want to quickly say first, the other thing about keep going on about the election is it makes you look kind of powerless because why didn't you manage to win it? You're sort of saying these people have all the power.
Right.
But anyway, which is not really Trump's thing, you'd think. But yes, absolutely. The whole appeal of DeSantis is he has Trump's policies without Trump's personality. That's basically it. But yeah, some people are sick of it, although Trump and DeSantis together are the most popular by far.
Yeah.
Cruz is somewhat popular. Then you go down to like the Mitt Romneys, they're very unpopular, and the Cheneys and all that side of the party. So people do want Trumpism, but whether they want Trump is the question.
And Tulsi Gabbard's come across the Republicans now, so she could. I mean, imagine her as a running mate for DeSantis.
Very cool.
Well, it's going to be dramatic, whatever happens. We've all got that to look forward to. Sticking with the Times, we have Scottish schools rejecting guidance from their English overlords.
Yes, so Scottish schools have been told to reject derogatory, demeaning and dangerous new NHS advice that suggests children who want to change gender may simply be going through a phase. So this, I think it was last week, NHS England issued new guidelines that said that a lot of children identifying as transgender are just going through a transient phase, and doctors previously been told to explore all underlying health, or doctors are now being told to explore all underlying health problems, including mental ill health, before helping people transition. Before that, there's a sort of attitude of just affirming their gender.
Yeah.
So you got, a 9-year-old who says, "I think I'm a whatever," and you're like, "Yeah, fine, come on, let's schedule the surgery." Which is obviously, we should tread carefully when we're dealing with, anything that involves long-term, life-changing chemical
The thing about that is gender dysphoria, part of the diagnosis of gender dysphoria is that it has to be persistent. It has to persist. And therefore, a child, it's not by definition a persistent condition because they're still a child.
Yeah, and also, traditionally children haven't been able to consent to things like this, life-changing surgery. So, and we've seen, with Tavistock, the scandal there, with over 1,000 families set to sue for damaged children's lives, and all these stories of detransitioners. That there are a lot of issues around railroading children into transitioning.
So a lot of people I've seen have commented and made the suggestion that this is like a repeat of the homophobia of the 70s and the 80s, because back then people would say, "Oh well, homosexuality is just a phase." When it comes to kids, of course, actually it sometimes is. But the point is that there isn't this mass load of evidence that says that gay people who think they're gay as kids don't end up being gay. The vast majority do end up being gay.
Yeah.
But the evidence, very clear evidence presented by the Cass report, shows that, in fact, most children who are uncomfortable with their gender do have that resolved naturally through puberty.
Yeah.
The evidence is in. Yeah. So it isn't the case that this is bigotry. This is hard. No, this is evidentially led decisions.
But surely the other ridiculous thing about that comparison is that there's no permanent surgery involved in deciding whether you're gay or not. Once children have had puberty blockers or surgery, that's it for life.
Yeah.
So in many cases, or most cases. So, yeah, it's absurd. I mean, and that case is used here, the homophobic analogy by this person, Maggie Chapman. But remember, this is the equality spokeswoman for the Scottish Greens. It's about the most lefty person you can possibly imagine. And that's the strange thing. I wonder if the average Scottish person is on board with this, because the other example they're using here is someone from Stonewall. So, come on.
Oh, yeah.
So let's look at the article where it comes from, because when I speak to people, even in North London, who are very lefty, I say North London like it's this communist utopia or so, but even when you speak to real lefties around London, they still say, "Hang on, I'm not sure about this Tavistock stuff, this transitioning children." Nearly everyone's against that, I find.
That's it. And therefore, Leo, I mean, you will know more than I do about this, but is it the case that the SNP can just ignore guidelines from the NHS England. Is that how this works?
Well, the SNP has come into struggles against Westminster on a variety of things that don't really come under its remit. It's happened in education. It's happened in. They brought through the Named Persons Act, which basically took the responsibility for children away from parents and handed it to the government.
But didn't that get overturned by the Supreme Court?
That was overturned, and there's been other laws, the hate crime bill, and all the rest of it. But this ties into that sort of governmental attitude of removing parental rights and also taking really quite extreme far left positions on things like transitioning children.
But what's disturbing about this is they're ignoring the evidence that has been presented by medical professionals who are at the top of their field.
Yeah.
So that's clearly ideological as opposed to evidence-led, and that's a problem.
Politicians often ignore evidence. I mean, remember Professor David Nutt, the government's drug czar, was fired for presenting evidence that didn't chime with the government's policy. So I mean, it's not a new thing for politicians will do what's politically expedient for themselves, not what's correct or what's the right thing to do.
OK, we're going to move on now to Thursday's Guardian, and this is a story about Germany and cannabis.
Yeah, Germany announces plan to legalise cannabis for recreational use. So it says Germany wants to make it legal for adults to purchase and own up to 30 grams of cannabis for recreational use and to privately grow up to 3 plants. So firstly, very German is up to 3 plants, would have to be that specific. But really, you're talking about turning the whole nation into drug dealers to give tax to the state. That's how I see it. They're saying, hang on, we can make a load of money out of this. Let's make everyone have up to 3 plants in their house and we'll turn them all into drug dealers. That's how I saw it, and I'm sure people will disagree with me.
I mean, you have some broadly libertarian values, I would say.
No, not anymore.
No?
Okay. The older I get, the more up on that scale I go on the grid thing. I stay just slightly to the right, very moderate, but I go up on the authoritarian scale. I get much more of a Burkean conservative.
Would you at least concede that when it comes to a mild drug like cannabis, that maybe adults should be able to make their own decisions about what they put in their body?
No. And it says here we don't want to expand cannabis consumption. Of course it's going to expand cannabis consumption, making it legal and telling everyone to have 3 plants in their house. I think, no, it's very strange. The middle class sort of libs are very anti-smoking, aren't they? But they're very pro-weed. Don't you find that interesting?
Not really. Leo, what do you think about this?
I kind of agree with Nick. I think they should be decriminalising or legalising drugs that are good for you, like mushrooms that are entertaining and don't have any ill effects, or cocaine that helps you tidy the house faster. But,
Wait a minute, though. Surely, right, when it comes to drugs, if people are using them recreationally because of their, if you legalise it, doesn't that completely wipe out the illegal trade in drugs and all those gangsters and the murders and the violence?
Actually not. In the USA, because it's so highly taxed, people have been turning back to the illegal market in cannabis because it's cheaper to get it off criminals. But a lot of countries have decriminalised the USA, parts of the USA, Thailand, Canada, Uruguay. But yeah, it's a really damaging drug. People think it's just a recreational drug. No, it saps people's ability to fill in forms, to do anything that makes them listen to go a trance. They stop washing their clothes as frequently.
Have you seen really what happens when people get drunk, Leo? I mean, we have this. This is a very damaging drug.
Let's ban that as well.
No, but alcohol.
You want to ban that too?
Yes, why not?
You're just becoming full-on authoritarian now, Nick.
British people would die out if there wasn't alcohol giving us, letting us break down the social boundaries to actually have sex and procreate.
OK, well, that's an interesting perspective. Coming up, though, shocking scenes on Channel 4, shocking revelations from the Pope, and the shocking price of a pint. See you in 2 minutes.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, We're
on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel. Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales
And Northern Ireland.
On TV.
on radio,
And online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners with me, Andrew Doyle, going through Thursday's newspapers with comedians Leo Kearse, the otter of Caledonia, and the big dog.
I'm a gerbil.
Nick Dixon. You're a gerbil, eh? I was trying to give you a nickname.
Capybara.
That's all. A capybara. There we go. We're going to start here with The Guardian, and economic discrimination could become an official form of discrimination like racism or sexism.
OK, The Guardian, yeah, make positive discrimination illegal like racism or sexism official to tell UN. This is Olivier de Schutter, and it's quite fascinating. He wants to go to the UN and say, what about povertyism, guys? So it's quite funny because it's
povertyism.
Yeah, and it's kind of like what I said before about Labour. It's sort of the establishment, whoever you want to call these people, liberal establishment, remembering class again. They've got racism and sexism, and they say we want to have povertyism alongside this, where you have to be nice to poor people. It's like them rediscovering that class exists. And he does cite some reasonable examples, like people judging CVs more harshly by the location that you're applying from, your address, and things like this. But it's just quite funny that he's finally noticed that so-called povertyism, it's not going to work because people are going to judge people if they're that kind of person. They'll judge people anyway.
This is a different kind of discrimination. I mean, the thing about there's a tangible impact of poverty that means you end up being discriminated against in a way that doesn't necessarily happen because of, say, sexuality or something like that. I mean, if you go and buy a pair of shoes but you can't afford the shoes because you don't have enough money. I mean, can you now, under this law, sort of say, well, that's discriminating against me and you're going to have to give me the shoes at a lower price?
Yeah. Probably, but then again, if you think about it, these kind of people want you to own nothing and be happy anyway, so you'll be renting the shoes anyway, I guess.
The communism by the back door.
We'll all use the same pair of shoes.
Make it make sense, Leo.
Yeah, and it's a very nebulous definition. With something like sexism or homophobia, it's very clear-cut. You know, what the identifying the person and also identifying the discrimination. But this, anything could be painted. And we've seen with the modern world how, people can really strain and strive to see everything through a prism of discrimination and prejudice and privilege. And this will just give them an extra prism that's even more cloudy.
But what I'm saying is that poverty, enables or enacts a form of discrimination by its nature, because you don't have the opportunities that other people have. There's no way for you to surpass that.
And also, it's a good thing. Inequality is a good thing because it means if you work hard, you can get out of it and you can become, one of the successful people. If everybody was equal,
oh, for goodness
then there'd never be any.
He actually talks about...
But if you're rich, it's too easy. If you're rich and you've got everything, you don't have to work at all.
It's not that easy for rich people. Look at Polly Yates.
I don't know who that is.
Or Michael Hutchins.
Oh, right, OK. So you're saying, yes, rich people have bad lives sometimes. I'm not denying that. But the truth is, and you must acknowledge
the struggle is real,
that if you grow up poor, it's harder for you to become rich later on than if you're born rich.
Well, I don't know. I grew up poor-ish.
Did you?
Yeah, I did.
the kind of attitude Leo was talking about is actually covered in the piece. He says that we need to stop talking about the poor people having only themselves to blame, the kind of, question time, having to go at the benefits scroungers. And he says here, he talks about people assuming because they've done well, it's because they're better. Survivorship bias, basically. Right. But that's nothing new. Those are old arguments. So I don't know why this povertyism is new.
It's kind of fascinating to me that the left might finally be rediscovering class and economic inequality. Because this is what they've forgotten about for the last 12 years, and it's made them ridiculous. Well, it's made them not left-wing, let's be honest. This next story from The Telegraph has a shocking revelation from the Pope. Leo, what's this?
Yes, this is a headline that typifies the Weimar-esque degeneracy of modern life. The Pope has said that even nuns watch porn. Some are actually in it, from some of the stuff that I've seen. But, however, the Pope also warned his brothers and sisters, speaking ecumenically, to be careful as the devil enters from there. I'm not sure where exactly he was pointing when he said the devil enters from there.
Let's not dwell on that, Leo. You do understand those nuns that you've seen are not actual nuns.
Well, it didn't say.
Well,
it didn't say.
I'm going to stick my neck out and suggest they were fake nuns.
One of them stuck her neck out as well. But yeah, he says a person with a pure heart should not be looking at porn. But I don't know. There's ethical porn. There's homemade stuff, amateur stuff.
I mean, look, it's no great surprise, is it, Nick, that the pontiff, the leader, the God's representative on earth, the Catholic Church, is saying don't watch pornography. Surely that's part of his job.
That's completely reasonable. He's completely right that it comes from the devil, and that's all correct. The only part where the plot thickens a little bit is it says the Vatican had to launch an investigation in 2020 after the Pope's official Instagram account liked an image of a Brazilian bikini model. So that's like, you sort of wonder, where's this coming from?
That could be just one of his minions pressing the wrong
button. It could easily be.
There's no way he runs his own Twitter.
I'm not saying that for a second. But yeah, it's interesting that even he's saying nuns and people are struggling with it. It is a big problem. Porn in society. It needs to be banned.
This article talking about the porn coming from the devil and that kind of... there are arguments. Camille Paglia makes the argument, for instance, that Michelangelo was a kind of pornographer, in terms of the images that he painted in the Sistine Chapel, which are very sexually explicit.
Well, maybe we should ban that as well.
It's very hard to get the Sistine Chapel to your garden shed.
Are you suggesting we paint over the Sistine Chapel, Nick?
Just outright bans for everything. No, the thing is about porn, Andrew, you've got to admit, although the libertarian side is like we should be able to access it, wouldn't society be a lot better if we couldn't?
I think that's highly speculative and we'll never know.
OK.
And some people think that pornography is a form of art. So there we go. All it takes to save the planet is cutting down to 2 burgers a week. So I've solved global warming. Nick, because I have none. I have no burgers a week.
That's good, because you failed to solve the Irish problem, but I'm glad you're improving your hit rate.
Give me time. No one else has been able to solve it for 800 years.
I'll give you tonight. So cut meat consumption to 2 burgers, as you say, to save the planet. It's so it begins. The WEF, eat the bugs and be happy. It's the meat tax. It's the Gates synthetic meat. They're trying to ban meat, Andrew. We've talked about it before.
They're not trying to ban meat. They're advising people to eat less meat.
They're trying to ban meat. Isn't it?
Who's they?
It's they, Andrew. The WEF. Well, we're not allowed to say the globalists, but
this is not a WEF article.
Look,
this is a climate crisis report.
Yes, listen to this. Climate's always the justification. Listen to this. Meat consumption should be reduced to the equivalent of about 2 burgers, right? And public transport expanded about 6 times faster than its current rate. So it just happens that what the climate needs is vegan socialism. That's what they're saying, Andrew.
Leo, is it not the case, though, that in the West, we do eat far too much meat? I mean, it's not normal.
No, actually, I mean, if Lewis Schaefer was here, he'd be able to explain. He eats solely a pure meat.
He only eats meat.
So does Jordan Peterson. Look how well he's doing.
Diet. Yeah.
Beef and salt.
Yeah, that's made his voice kind of whiny. But meat is healthy, and there's a growing body of evidence that it's actually healthier than seed oils and carbohydrates and all the rest of it. And also, it doesn't need to be bad for the planet. I mean, all right, factory farmed, beef and stuff like that can be bad, but lamb that's reared on hillsides, that's healthy.
It's not healthy for the lamb that gets killed in the abattoir.
I forgot you were a vegetarian. He's a vegetarian. Don't try and reason with.
It's the cycle of life. We're carnivores.
We're omnivores, Leo.
Well, we're omnivores, but part of that is eating lamb. And also wildfowling, killing wild animals. That means that tracts of wild land are kept pristine, environmentally pure, so the animals can live there. And it's actually amazingly good for the environment.
And then you can frack on that land. So, but Andy, this comes from Systems Change Lab. What do we know about these people? Who are they?
I'm not having this conspiratorial nonsense.
It's not conspiratorial. They're openly saying
advice about eating less
Andrew,
beef.
they're going to tax me, and then eventually you won't be able to get it at all, and you'll have to eat zabug.
I'm going to put a stop to this. We're going to move on to the Daily Mail next. Nick, are you a sensitive person?
I am, absolutely. Oh, yes, and I'm so sensitive, you've upset me by skipping to this story. But yeah, this is about highly sensitive people, which is interesting. It is actually arguably a real thing. I don't know. A therapist once told me I had it, but the problem is, I was like, what can you actually do about it? So you can identify it by 5 main traits. One of them is that you hate change. Tick. So I've got that one. One of them is when you're overwhelmed by too many things happening at once, definitely. One of them is when you don't like crowds and you have to withdraw, which I have as well. One is that you're incredibly sensitive to other people's moods, which I have. Whenever people are rude to me on this show, it upsets me all night. And then the other one, the only one I don't have is that people can't perform in front of others. Obviously, I was a stand-up comedian 11 years, now I do this, so I've managed to overcome that one. But it's really interesting. It is a real thing, kind of. But then is it kind of just like your personality, like you're sensitive, but you're a genius, sort of like me. So, is it just one of those things? Someone once said to me, this is a bit insensitive if you're autistic or you have autistic children or something, but I was once saying, like, oh, maybe I have Asperger's or autism or something. And this guy said to me, you're just a bloke. And that kind of simplified things. So with this, are you a highly sensitive person? Is it a pathology or is it just how you are?
We haven't got much time. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think, if you look at horoscopes and things like that, or cold readers, people who read your palm or whatever, they find commonalities in everybody, and everybody's got the same things. Oh, I feel awkward at parties. Oh, I want people to like me. It's all like everybody's, got a bit of this. Just need to grow up here.
OK, well, that's all we've got time for. Thanks to Leo and Nick. And, of course, I will be back tomorrow for Headliners at 11 o'clock with Quincy and Scott Caporo. See you then.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories